Serving their community is who they are because they love where they live. REMAX 3D Real Estate is proud to bring you Heart of Greenville, a video series dedicated to celebrating all the wonderfully great things about Greenville, Texas. On every episode, Dennisha Denney will share Greenville's story through the stories of people who call Greenville home. This is Heart of Greenville.
Hey y'all, I'm Dennisha Denney, your host of Heart of Greenville, and today we are sitting on the third floor at the Landmark on Lee Street in a room called The Landing. And I am so honored to have my guest here today with me. It is Mr. Tom Oliver. How are you today, Tom?
Hello, how are you?
I'm wonderful.
Good.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show.
Yes, well, I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad I ran into you at the fair.
Yep,
we were
that's
walking
right.
down the
That's
streets
right.
and I saw you and I was like, hey, I've been meaning to call you. I wanted you to come on our show because I know whenever we listed your home and got it sold for you, you have so many stories in this community. But I want to start with one of your stories, and that is about this building, because you know so much about this post office building that we're sitting in, where the Rotary Clubs now meet, and it's now an event center and that sort of thing. But you have some very special ties to this building. So will you share with our audience about those?
Sure. Turns out my dad, during the early part of the 30s, the Depression, he was going to Wesley College, and that's where my mom was also going to college at the time. And times were tough, and so he had to drop out of college. And so he accepted a job as a substitute mail carrier at this building.
What time frame was that?
That would have been the early 30s.
Okay.
And so anyway, he worked his way up. He was a carrier in town, regular route in town, and then worked his way on up to becoming a rural route carrier out in the Cache area, Route 4. And then finally, he was nominated by Representative Ray Roberts, and because my dad's generation in the post office was the last one where it required a presidential appointment to be postmaster.
Really? So
Yes.
the president, like, of the United States?
Yes, Lyndon Johnson signed this certificate, and I have it at home. And so anyway, it's just always been very special. I used to come down here with my dad when he was sorting the mail and getting ready for his daily route, and it was just a good time. And so I've also had the opportunity to know other people that worked here as well, such as John Little and his dad, Bill Little, and so Ted Balch's dad. So there's other people in the community whose parents worked here as well. So it's always been a special place for me.
It really is a special building. And I mean, I know it's near and dear to our hearts too, because this is where our Rotary Clubs meet. But I'm so thankful that I guess the Post Office Foundation came along to preserve the building so that it could still be used today.
That's right. Yeah, I happen to be a member of that board, and they're changing the membership, but they asked if I wanted to stay on, and I agreed to, because I said it got a place in my heart as well. So
Absolutely. I'm glad you're on that board. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
So we have a really cool basement down in the basement. Do you have any basement stories or any of these cool attic accesses up here on the third floor? I've walked through a few tunnels back here.
Well, I do remember, the basement has changed so much because they do the Halloween on the Square.
Yes,
I believe, or
our
not
haunted
on the Square,
landmark.
but anyway, the landmark, the Halloween, and Bob Arrington, I believe, heads that up. But I do recall my dad talking about the postal inspectors, and they had a special side entrance into the building they came to, and did not announce that they were going to be here. And there are little slots up in the ceiling where they could take a look and make sure people are not doing something they shouldn't be doing. And so anyway, it's just that's just one of the things about the building that make it very unique.
It is. It's a really cool building. I didn't know why those slots were there. I walked through those tunnels, and I'm like, you can kind of see down. So
that's intentional, so the postal inspectors could keep an eye on the mail processing. So
wow, that's really cool. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Now, you and your family, you've been from Greenville for a very long time. How far back do your generations
that makes me
go?
sound like I'm old.
No, not you. Your generation.
No.
Your lineage here.
On my mom's side of the family, they were in the cotton business. It was my great-grandparent had land here, land holdings, and raised cotton on it. And he lived right across the street from Kavanaugh United Methodist Church. Sort of diagonally across the street from it on the corner there. And on the other side of the family, on my dad's side of the family, my grandfather was a conductor with the L&A Railroad. And so, but all of our family was right here. And I was going through some abstracts the other day on land that my grandfather on my mom's side had, and they go back into the 1880s. And when you think of Greenville actually not being founded until 1846, so it's only 40 years after that, and they were here during those years, during the early formation of the town. So roots go back pretty deep there.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
That is really cool. Let's talk about Tom Bethel.
Uh-huh.
Tell me a little bit about him, because I have a quote still on my whiteboard today.
Well, Tom Bethel was my grandfather, and it's interesting on his letterhead, and I have some out in the car, but I didn't bring it in. But anyway, it just says T.M. Bethel, Cotton, Greenville, Texas, and that's all it says.
That's all it said. All it needed to say.
And so that's what he spent his whole career doing. And he was quite active in the community. He was very active in our church. He was a Mason. He was the former Grand Commander for the state of Texas in the Knights Templar. And anyway, and he at Kavanaugh Methodist Church, his family was one of the early charter members of the church, and his mom taught Sunday school in what was called the old South Ward School. It's where the old Travis School was, at the corner of O'Neill and Wesley.
Oh yes.
And so anyway, but he loved cotton. He loved raising cattle, and so. For me growing up, he would sort of take me along with him wherever he went, and he was a member of Noon Rotary as well for many years, and so he loved that. I used to go with him when Noon Rotary would meet at the Washington Hotel, and it was on the second floor, and so as a kid, we would go up there and so enjoy a meal and enjoy the conversation there. So anyway.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
So that laid that foundation for you for being a Rotarian.
Right. My dad belonged to the same Rotary Club, the Noon Rotary Club.
Do you remember what quote I have on my whiteboard?
I'm sure it's his aspiration, when he was here for Greenville, and it was his hope, and what he hoped to contribute to was to have a place where his children would live and work, and when they grew up. And so anyway, that's something that always stuck with me. I'm assuming that's a similar quote to what you have.
It is.
Maybe not verbatim to what I said, but some to that effect.
Yes, that's exactly what it was about. It's about raising up young people so that they want to come back and make Greenville their home. And
that's right.
He wanted to build a community that people wanted to live and work and be a part of. And that stuck with me. And so I wrote that, when we were selling your home, and you gave me all kinds of quotes and newspaper articles and all kinds of things. But that was and that quote may have been in his obituary. I don't remember exactly where it was.
Yeah, it was.
But when I read that, I wrote that on my board because I love this community so much too. And I felt, and on there I wrote 25-year Rotarian. And it resonated with me because it's our turn to build that same thing.
Good.
And so I feel like I'm taking on that responsibility that, everyone that's gone before us has laid. And so I just wanted to share that with you, that you put that in my mind, and it stayed there.
Great. I do think, like when my wife Sharon and I were thinking about retirement, and I'd worked for a company, Fisher Controls, for so many years, but when it came time to think about retirement, we thought, well, I'm an Aggie, so we thought maybe College Station, see the games and everything, but we thought, no, Greenville is where we want to be.
Yes.
And so that's where we started.
I was going to say, you want to tell the story a little bit about you and Sharon, how y'all met?
Oh. Well.
It's a fun little story.
Anyway, Sharon was born in Paris, Texas, but she came here. Her family moved here when we were in the 4th grade together, and her dad worked for Perkins Brothers downtown. And so anyway, one day I was out near our home, and I threw a rock, and unfortunately, it hit Sharon right in the forehead. And she had petticoats on this bike she was with, and her friend was with her. And so the next thing I know, her mother is calling my parents, and so I'm in big trouble, real quick. But anyway, we got over that. And
that was not the best way to start the relationship in the fourth grade.
So a little rocky,
Little rocky.
But anyway, in the 10th grade, I belonged to the Key Club, and we went to a Key Club dance. And I invited Sharon to go, and she lived over on Templeton Street. And anyway, I knocked on the door, and her mother comes to the door, and she says, "Sharon, here's that little Tommy Oliver, that rock-throwing Tommy Oliver is here." So anyway, so it went from there, and she laughed, fortunately. So
I was going to say, did she say that lovingly?
Yeah. No, she was good with it. So anyway, everything worked out. And so but we got married in Central Christian Church. That was her church, right across from the post office downtown. And that was in '66, and so here we are today, so still married. So anyway, but that was a fun time.
It was. It was fun listening to the two of you tell that story. We need Sharon here. We need to see her facial expressions too. But no, I think that's a fun story, and I love that. I mean, you guys go back to fourth grade. You basically have spent all of your lives together and built an incredible life together with your kiddos. And so you guys left for a little while, right? So you both grew up here, and then you got married. And tell us what you did in that time frame.
Okay. As I mentioned, I went to A&M. Sharon and I got married in '66, and at that time at A&M, I was in the Corps of Cadets, and it was mandatory, all-male school, and I was in the Corps. And so once I got out, I had a commission, and so I knew I was going into the Army. And so I went ahead, though, and stayed on and got my master's at A&M, and Sharon was teaching elementary school. She went to East Texas State, or A&M Commerce, and got her degree in elementary education. She taught the fourth grade in Bryan, Texas. And so anyway, after that, though, I accepted a job with a company called Fisher Controls. And they were headquartered in Marshalltown, Iowa. And we had never really been out of the state of Texas, I don't think, that much. And this was February when we went up there. And we had a little '66 Chevrolet, and had nylon tires. We got up there, and it was below zero. And the tires, when you got up the next morning, you drove, and they had a flat spot that was frozen on the tires, so you sort of bounced down the road, Never experienced that.
No, we don't experience that in Texas.
And also, we stayed at the Thunderbird Motel up there, and we had a little dog, a little poodle. Let the dog out. The dog turns around and looks at me like, "What's this? What am I supposed to do here?" So anyway, but it all worked out, and we stayed up there. Well, actually, I left there. I was only there 3 months. Then we went in the Army, and I served for 2 years in the Army. Wow. Came back.
And thank you for that. Thank you for your service for that.
No problem.
We need you guys. And that's a big sacrifice. And shout out to Sharon, too. That's hard to be, a single wife. And
appreciate it, really.
So thank you for that.
At that time, actually, I'm pleased to see I go up to the VA hospital in Bonham a lot. And I think of some of the sacrifices that some of the people that really made during their time in the service. Particularly, I can relate to the guys that were in Vietnam. And so anyway, and at that time it was very divisive about being in Vietnam, and so it wasn't an easy time necessarily to serve in the Army or any of the armed forces.
Did you have to go overseas for any of that?
Not for that. I was stationed in Washington, D.C. the whole time. So I had an MBA in computer science, and at that time, not many people had a degree in computer science, and so I was able to work for a special board there at that time, and so it worked out.
Yeah, well, that was an honor and privilege to get to do that.
Well, I enjoyed it, and but I never thought. I thought I was going to be assigned to going to Vietnam, and it just turned out because of the degree I had, it allowed me to have a specialty that they needed. So it just worked out. But
that was a blessing. I'm sure your mother's prayers had something to do with that, right. And your wife.
You're right. You're right. But anyway, after that, we went back to Marshalltown, Iowa, and I was there 5 years. And then they said, "Would you like to move down in the Houston area to LaPorte and start up a service company?" So I said, our bags were packed, you know. Cold winters in Iowa are for the Iowans, but for a Texas boy, it was a little tough. And so anyway, went down, ran the service company, and after 2.5 years, my boss came down from Iowa, and he said, how would you like to move to Tokyo and run our joint venture over in Japan? And so I said, Sharon and I said, well, we have to think about that. Well, we waited about 10 minutes after we drove down the road. We called him back and said, sure, why not?
Why not, right?
With 2 kids, what were they, 7 and 4?
Oh, wow.
So we just head out and couldn't speak a word of Japanese, you know, but ended up spending 5 years in Japan.
Wow.
And so it was a great experience. And then came back and...
why did it only take you a few minutes to decide that? Because that's a major decision.
I know.
I mean, you just knew.
We were young. We said, what the heck?
What the heck? Why
you know,
not?
why not do it? So.
And you knew it wasn't for forever.
No, we didn't know what would
you
happen.
didn't know?
Yeah, we didn't know for sure. I mean, it was 2 years. What we were told 2 years, and then they asked me, said, would you stay on for 3 more years? So, sure, we
Wow.
did. And there were only 2 of us in the company that spoke English, and the rest spoke Japanese, all the rest of the employees. So if you wanted to find out what's going on in your business, you need to study the language. So I had a tutor come into the office every day before work, and I would have an hour in Japanese lessons and then do my work and so on. And Sharon took lessons as well in Japanese. And
So are you fluent now?
that's been a long time ago. But at one time, I can converse, you know, pretty well with the Japanese and our company, and so it helped a lot. And it also, beyond just understanding the language, if you show a little bit of extending yourself into their world, then it really helps with relationships as well.
It means a lot to people in other countries when you try to adapt to their culture and
That's right.
You know,
That's
feel
right.
like you want to be a part of them and to keep.
And there's so much to learn from them. Their attention to detail is just incredible. So anyway, we had a super time. Our girls went to we aren't Catholic, but went to a Catholic school there, and there were probably 400 or 500 girls there, but they were from 50 different countries. And so when it came to looking at a child, they never looked at a child's color or whatever. I mean, it was just a person,
Right.
you know. And so it's something that they, to this day, they know. I mean, they're not biased
Right.
in any way
I
about
love
that.
that.
So,
yes, they see them as a person.
Yeah,
as
yeah.
God
And the reason
intended.
there were so many different countries, the embassy kids came to the same school. And
Okay.
so that's why they got to know them. And they've kept up those relationships with many of them, even to this day. So.
Wow, they probably have friends all over the world.
Well, they're fortunate. I mean, they have kept up, though, and so it's good. But anyway, we came back from Japan, and they asked me to be a plant manager over in McKinney for Fisher Controls. It's a regulator manufacturing plant. And sure, and so I was there for 8 years and did that and became a business director for one of our divisions at the same time. And then they asked if I would if we would move to Singapore, and we did for 3 years, where I was responsible for Asia Pacific at that time. And so traveled a lot in Asia, particularly in China. And
Did your family move with you again at that point?
well, okay, this was tough. Yes, Sharon did. Jenny, our youngest, spent her senior year in high school in Singapore. So for a few months, that was very difficult.
I bet.
So anyway, and Terry was...
You were not the favorite parent
No.
at that moment.
Specifically me.
Yes.
So, but Terry was already in A&M at that time, so she was already back here. But Jenny
Okay.
spent a year there, and then she went to A&M as well. And but then after that, in '94, we moved to outside of London, in a little village called Bearsted, and I ran a facility there and was responsible for our European, Middle East, Africa operations for our valve business. So, almost 3 years there, 2.5 years, and then back to McKinney. And
That's so wild to me that you ended up back in McKinney, only 35 minutes away from home.
But we didn't live there.
Oh.
Because my parents wanted to move into a condo. And so that's when we took over the old house that you helped us sell.
Okay.
And so we took it over, And the first thing we did was to replace all the roofing, all the plumbing, all the wiring.
Yes.
So it was, had good integrity, I guess you'd say. And then I was at church one Sunday, and we had spent all of our savings doing the roof, the plumbing, and the wiring. And so I was at church one Sunday, and a person came up to me and says, "Listen, by the way, when are you going to get started on that old house?" So we were broke and had nothing to show for it. So
but
anyway,
it had good bones and good structure.
good bones, yes, it did. Yeah, and so anyway, but that's sort of how we got back to to Greenville, and we decided that's where we wanted to stay. So
at the point you came back to Greenville, all your kiddos, your two girls, were raised at that point.
yeah, well, yeah. From Japan, they came back in about in elementary grades, but they spent most of their other grades right here in Greenville.
Oh,
And still have good friends here too.
I love that. Okay, so we're on Heart of Greenville. So
Uh-huh.
I want to transition a little bit and
All right.
talk about what you love about Greenville. And I know you love Greenville because no one would sign up to be mayor of the city of Greenville without loving Greenville. So let's talk about that, Tom. What do you love about Greenville?
Sharon and I talk about this a lot, and it's simple things. Sure, we go to Dallas every once in a while, but we sure are glad to come back home. And more, Greenville has more and more to offer, whether it's restaurants or whether it's shopping or groceries or whatever. And it's so convenient. In 5 or 10 minutes, we can be anywhere in the town. And not only can we be there, but we know the people. We had a little accident with our car the other day, a minor accident. So take it to a Ford house. I have USAA insurance, okay? So an approved shop is the Donahue Ford shop. Go in there, and here is Darren Money.
Yes.
Peanut. And so, without ever talking to him very much, within 5 minutes, we know so many people in common between us. And I love that. I love, it's just so family. It's so close, the town.
Yes.
So,
You do love
to
this town. I can tell, you're getting emotional about it.
Well,
You do love this town.
yeah, because you're right. It goes way back, and it's through my family. So anyway.
Yes, I love that. That's when you know you're in the right place.
Yeah,
And
no,
exactly where you need to be.
I wouldn't trade.
Yeah.
With anyone.
And it is hard to put it into words sometimes,
Yeah.
Our love for it. And I think that's what keeps us here. The other day I was at a retreat and we were on a hike, and one of the ladies, she's from Greenville, we were here, and, we're like, we could live anywhere in the world, but we choose to live in Greenville.
Yeah.
And it's the people. It always comes back to having such great people here.
We love going, we'll go at least once a week to Morisco's. You know Morisco's?
Yes.
The little
downtown.
seafood place? Yeah.
Yes.
And Senor Gonzo and his wife Sapporo and Emily, the daughter,
Oh.
and his brother Jose. I mean,
You've just gotten to
it's
know the whole family.
Well, and that's the way it is about a lot of places.
Yes.
And it's not unique. And to us,
Right.
we're so familiar with all of that and all the people, and it just makes it come together for us.
When you decided to run for mayor,
Yeah.
what made you make that decision?
Well, I retired in 2003. In 2004, some guys talked to me and asked if I'd put my name in for city council. And I did. And so I ran for the council seat, and a gentleman, Mr. Jones, he put in his name to run against me 15 minutes prior to the deadline for signing up.
Oh.
And so I thought, whoa, I've never campaigned for anything,
Right.
Well, what he forced me to do is I went through and got all the voting records of who has voted in the past elections and all of that. And I went through every person who had previously voted in any election in my district.
In your district, right?
And I met each one of them.
Wow.
And got to know what do they want for Greenville? What do they need? And so the first person I called when I won the election was Mr. Jones and said, thank you for making me actually campaign.
Wow.
So
I love that story. Yeah, otherwise you would have you've
say,
got it. And
if you go in and you don't have to compete and you don't have to campaign, you never really get down into the roots.
That's right. You never dig deep.
Right. And in the current election, one thing that the Herald Banner wrote an editorial about, and it was in the district, I think, on the north side of town, and very few people came out to vote. And you know, that is something we really need to work on as a community. We need to get much greater voter turnout.
Right.
And,
all across the city and county.
Yeah, yeah. And that's disappointing, you know, but it's an opportunity. We need maybe Stacey Abrams to come over and put on a, you know, how to rally the vote or something.
Right. Right. You know, I've always felt like, okay, everyone needs to vote, everyone needs to vote. And I had a really good friend one time tell me, the great thing, I'm like, people fought for our right and for our freedom to vote, but they put it into a really good perspective for me.
Yeah.
They said, the people who fought for that fought for the right. And
Right.
it's your right if you want to vote or you don't vote.
Right.
And it helped put that into check for me
Sure.
and put that into balance. And so, you know, I love that. But I do wish more people, you know, would go out and vote, because votes do matter. And that's your way that your voice gets to be heard too.
Yeah, and maybe more people need to run for an office to force others, as Mr. Jones
Right.
forced me to go out.
And that was such a positive force.
No,
that was
it
a positive
and he
thing.
said, what he told me was, when he filed, he said, you know, he said, because we sat down and talked before the campaign actually started. And he said, you know, he said, we agree on just almost everything. But he said, I just don't think anybody should get an office without having to campaign.
Oh,
And so I gave him full credit.
wow. That's really cool.
So
Well, that was another blessing in disguise. At the time,
it really was.
It fired you up.
Oh, it did, yeah.
What was your favorite? I'm going to ask this one last question before we go to your final question, but what was your favorite thing about being the mayor of Greenville?
You know, I was really blessed with having an incredible staff that I worked with. Steve Alexander, Brent Money, John Adele, Debbie Newell, on and on. We had tremendous people, and I love working with the staff. We also had great council members, and Hattie Tennyson, you know, and Betty Franklin, and Fred Thomas, who recently passed away. But over those 8 years that I was on the council, there were so many people, that Doug Roseharts and the Lehman Bryants and just a lot of people, Brian Heron, and I enjoyed working for all of them because there was a common goal of serving the community, and that really is satisfying when you feel you can make some substantive steps in that direction, in the right direction. So I enjoyed that.
Well, thank you so much for serving in that capacity. It takes a lot from you and from your family when you do that, and I know those weren't easy days, and but they made a difference. Our community, it set us in a great direction,
Well,
and we're
thank you very
continuing to
much.
go in that great direction.
I think also, let me just add one thing.
Sure.
There was a big emphasis, and I give credit to Steve Alexander and to John Adele in particular about this. Planning was huge, a huge priority with them. And there were a couple of different initiatives that were done in the area of planning with people like Freeze and Nichols and whatever.
Right.
And it was so good to go through that process and force you to think, where do we want to be? Where do we want to head? And I give them a lot of credit.
I enjoyed serving on the West Area Planning Committee.
That was it. That was one of the plans.
That was one of the plans. And so we really got to talk about what do we want the west part of the city to look like, our gateway to everyone coming in from the Metroplex. And it's so important that you plan. We're going to grow.
Yeah.
And so we get to decide, are we going to let the world dictate how we grow, or are we going to plan how we want to grow? And
the only thing I hated about that plan, it says small area.
It did.
What is small?
I took it out of my mind, I guess. I just called it the West Area. But it wasn't small. It was big. It was
like
huge.
half of the...
Yeah, it carried all the way over to 1570 and all the way to the ETJ. Yeah, it was a big area. So
anyway, thank you for serving me on that.
You're so welcome. It was my pleasure. Okay, Tom, I said I was going to ask you a random question at the end. So if you will pick a number between 1 and 20, I will ask you the final question.
Number 11, please.
Oh, I love it. Number 11, what is your favorite restaurant in town and why?
Oh, I've already said it.
You already said it.
We're East Coast. There are so many good ones now. You know,
Yes.
there for a while, we didn't really have a lot, but now we have so many options.
I know.
And so, anyway, but I will.
Tell me why you love Morisco's.
I know the people, and the food is the best seafood you can have anywhere.
I'm going to have to go down there. I've been there once.
Oh,
My mom
it's-
took me once. I need to go back and go check it out.
Go with Sharon and me. We'll show you around.
Okay. I need to go with you. That's right. So I can meet the whole family. I can join the family.
That's right.
Oh, Tom, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. It's been such a pleasure to get to reminisce and others get to know you and know your heart. And it's so evident how much you love Greenville. And so thank you for coming back here and continuing that legacy.
Thank you very much, Dennisha.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
you inviting me.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Heart of Greenville. This video series, which is designed to celebrate Greenville, Texas, is spearheaded by REMAX 3D Real Estate.